everybody. Welcome back to the Flatten Your Fear Summit. I am so excited to bring you this interview today. We have with us from over the pond, which is awesome, world-renowned coaching, mindset, leadership expert, Dr. Maurice Duffy. Dr. Duffy, welcome to the summit.
Hi, how are you doing? Glad to be here, delighted to be here, and hopefully over the next few minutes able to add some value to it.
Absolutely, you will. I know you add value to a lot of lives and you have great stories to tell. So I want to get into this. You know, Dr. Duffy, this is about helping people get past their fears. But before we kind of dig into some of your past, I want to, if you'll allow me, I want to read something off your website because I had to print it because I didn't want to try to re-say it perfectly. And I love how you describe what you do. So let me read it back to you. It says, I comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. I am dedicated to helping you be the best you can be. I help you understand your mindset. I challenge the things that are holding you back. I build a path to your dreams. I walk with you, achieving your goals. I ask, why are you here? What is your purpose? I help you understand why you are so important to all of our futures and where you can really make that contribution. Now, that just got me because I'm all about purpose. I'm all about, helping people find that. So I wanted people to hear your heart there. I think that's amazing. Tell us, Dr. Duffy, how did you get to the point where you knew that's who you were and that's what you were bringing to the world?
Well, that's it's a long story. I'm a bit of a veteran these days, right? I kind of started, it seems like many years ago, on a professional career. And that was kind of very much where I saw my future was in professional life and in corporate life.
Yeah.
I've worked with a number of organizations, mainly North American organizations, from Nortel Networks to HP to Manpower to Right Management, etc. And in that journey, I was successful, but was I happy? And that was the kind of a critical question. I was successful. I was very driven about achieving the dream. And the dream was that happiness comes when you're successful, right? Which was kind of the wrong way around. I managed to kind of go through the corporate echelon and end up on boards and end up as senior vice president and end up managing thousands and thousands of people, but it wasn't giving me what I wanted. It gave me the status, it gave me the money, but it didn't give me peace. Right. And I remember I met a guy who was working with me by the name of, who wrote the Frankenstein. I'm trying to remember his name now. Who wrote the Frankenstein Manager? He wasn't referring to me. Right. But he said to me at the time, he says, Maurice, why do you do what you do? And I says, well, what do you mean? And he says, well, look, he says, you have an ability to either charm somebody, and you can certainly charm them, right? Or you can certainly piss them off, right? So why do you do what you do? And I'd never really given it any thought. I had just lived my life pushing the boundaries, trying to drive. And I started thinking more and more about it. And then I had almost, and you mentioned serendipity, almost at the same time I met a guy, by the name of Peter Vidmar, who went on to be kind of, the top performer, manager of the American Olympics team, first guy in history to score a perfect 10 on the pommel horse, right? All of that. And I started watching what he was doing. And I started trying to understand what he was doing. And I started trying to help him in what he was doing. And from there on, I just kind of gave up on corporate life and started coaching individuals. And it was as simple or as complex as that.
Wow, that's amazing. But obviously you had that gifting in you, because I know a lot of people like to hang up the sign of coach. It's become kind of a common thing now, we find, especially here in America. But the truth is you're either built for it or you're not. What was it about you that allowed you to see into people and help them bring out their purpose, help them find the answers that were hidden really to them? What was it about you and the way you are uniquely made that allowed you to see that that was such a strength?
I was with an 18-year-old yesterday, and she's one of the best golfers in Europe. And she had asked me the question, whether I would help her because she was 18 and she had come to one of the presentations that I had done and she became fascinated by what I was talking about. And I says, you need to tell me, what you want to achieve. And she said, well, I just want to be the best. And I said, well, that's just not good enough for me. I said, what do you want to be? And we went through this process. And I would say, where I am driven is about achieving. And that's achieving with the individual. And I want to make sure that we got that focus, and I've got to make sure that the mindset is right. And, that the journey that we're going on together is to achieve that particular goal. And we left the session with her saying, I want to be the number one in the world. And I said, I will help you be the number one in the world. Right. But, I'll call you when you're wrong. Yeah. I'll push you when you're lazy. I'll ask you the tough questions. I'm not going to sit here and say to you, this is going to be a comfortable ride. I'll comfort you when you have problems. Right. But I'll certainly make you feel uncomfortable when I think that you're not at the edge of what you're capable of and and how you should be performing.
Right, exactly. And that's what a true coach does. Not a counselor, a coach, right? A coach is going to point those things out to you. So let's go back a little bit in earlier in your life. Fear. Fear is something we all face. And this summit is about that. And fear can derail our purpose if we allow it. Fear can do a lot of bad things in our life if we allow. I want you to go back and share some personal stories, especially 1970 Dublin. I want you to share with us what fear looked like in your life and what you chose to do with some experiences that happened to you that were, in fact, one of them at least terrifying.
Yeah. I'm one of 10 kids. I was kind of born on the west coast of Ireland. I think the first fear I had in my life was that I was going to stay there on a small farm, and that was what was going to define my life. Yeah. I remember as a 17-year-old leaving the west coast and going to Dublin, and this is kind of early 70s, and this is when it wasn't a norm and it wasn't acceptable, and Dublin seemed like a huge city to me. And I was fortunate in the senses that I was kind of taken on as a graduate within one of the big banking organizations. And part of the assimilation or the induction was that I worked in a number of different parts of the bank. And I have had, the misery or the misfortune of being right at the forefront of being robbed twice in banks where people pointed either shotguns or guns at me. I have, been in the bank where I got kind of clipped on the back of my head by a guy holding a shotgun. And obviously in that moment, you think what's going to happen. You're going to be powerful. You're going to be not afraid. You're going to take them on. You're going to do all of these things. But in that moment, when you're terrified, when you're absolutely thinking this could go horribly wrong, you begin to kind of understand yourself a little bit better. But probably the incident that you're referring to more than anything else was in when I walked down a street in Dublin and I turned a corner and a bomb went off and killed over 10 people behind me. Wow. And I had walked past the particular car, literally 50 seconds, if it was that, before it went off. And you begin to ask yourself the question, why were some people picked and some other people weren't? Are you going to be defined by this? Are you going to let fear be the thing that dominates your mind? And I think that in everything that I have done subsequently, I have never done a job I've done before. I've never put myself in a position where I'm comfortable. I've always taken risks. And I don't know whether that was something that was within me because, the other 9 kids still live within kind of 50 miles of home. Wow. So I'm the only one who's left. I'm the only one who's lived in different countries. Yeah. I'm the only one who's gone into self-employment. I'm the only one who's an entrepreneur. I'm the only one who's got divorced. I'm the only one who has a second marriage. I'm the only one who has a kid with a second marriage. So I can kind of take all the first right through it. So, I was brought up and reared, you win for secure jobs. You win for security. You win to play it safe. My mum was, fantastic woman, went to mass twice a day, typical Irish West Coast of Ireland woman, but it was all about playing it safe. And I remember, I'll never forget, because when I went back and I was driving this big black Range Rover, top of the range Range Rover, and she says, "You're not drug dealing, are you?" Right?
Oh, Mom.
Right? She couldn't believe that this coaching could make you this much money.
Yeah, right.
You had to be doing something on the side.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting escapade.
Well, you had to break free of that mindset. I mean, it's not something your mom, it didn't make her a bad mom. It's just a generational mindset, right? And as you say, it's so interesting that none of your siblings really broke out of that. And they probably have lived very happy lives, but there was something inside of you that said, I've got to reach for more. Each time you do that, it's a decision, it's an intention. It's easy to stand still, but each time you do that, you face fear. And how many times did you ever say to yourself, all right, I'm going back? Or did you always know, I've got to keep pushing, I've got to keep exploring the boundaries of what I could do with my life?
For me, it's always been simply described in this way. When I ask people, where are you in your life on a scale of 0 to 100, I always see myself as 0. I always have seen myself as 0.
Interesting.
And I have a passionate belief, that the past is a place of reference, not a place of residency.
Wow.
We're all entitled to a meltdown or to kind of deal with the baggage. None of us, we judge other people's lives, in that 2-minute video reel that we see, rather than what's actually going on behind the camera. So we've all have problems, and we all have challenges, and we all have difficulties. And over the last 4 months through, isolation here, I've been working with a lot of people on mental problems and the difficulty that it causes. And fear is something, that you just cannot say, and this is what I kind of say to people all the time. Thoughts have, energy.
Yes.
And you cannot fight the thoughts,
Right.
So you have to allow the flow, and you have to allow them in. And if you don't, and if you're constantly pushing them away, then at 3 o'clock in the morning, they come crowding in. And that's the time when it's a horror show. So for most people, you have to be able to do it. And I'm a huge advocate of, meditation and yoga and mindfulness, but we can talk about that. But fear, and this is failure, is not the opposite of success either.
Right.
They're bundles together.
Yes.
So fear is not something that, and I know you talk about flatten it, but to me, it is about the courage is about not allowing the fear to hold you back.
Yes.
And that's the critical thing, recognizing it, knowing it's there. We're all afraid, we all have, fears of the future. I've got 11-year-old fears about sending them back to school,
Sure.
all of those things that are associated with it. But what we've got to do is to allow the energy in, to understand it, to dissect it, whatever terminology you want to use, and then to deal with it.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just to come out really stronger as a result of that.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice. So you've worked with a lot of high achievers from the sports community, definitely, in other leadership, in corporations. How do you see, it's a basic human experience, fear. It's not as though just because someone is at the top of their game in golf or in Olympic swimming that their fears really are any different necessarily than mine. The details may be different, but fear is fear. So as you've worked with these high performers and high achievers, how have you seen fear come out in their lives? How has it shown itself? What tools and techniques did you give them? Just share with us some anecdotes about fear as it relates to high performers, because I think there's a misnomer out there that if you get to a certain point in life, you just don't have fear, and that is just simply not true.
No, that's not, absolutely. I have a very good friend, and he fought in the first Iraq War, and he was in the SAS, and he's I won't tell you what his surname is, but his Christian name is Storm, which I think is a fantastic name for a guy who's going to be in the SAS. He's meant to be in it.
Yeah.
And he talks, and I became fascinated by, what does it take to be in the military, right? Where in actual fact, people are going to, why do you put yourself right at that edge? And he talked to me about some of the, when he had to go behind the lines and some of the activities that they were involved in. And he told me a story where there were 4 of them. And they were kind of huddled in this little hut. And the following day, they were going to have to run up this hill. And at the top of the hill, there were 6 guys with a machine gun. So they had to come out the hut and go up that hill, right? And they were sitting there and they were working out the strategy and they were thinking about it. Now, he says when he came out the door, first thing the following day, he didn't want to be the first one out the door. He didn't want to be the last one. Right? He didn't want to be the first one up the hill. He didn't want to have guys staying halfway up the hill. Can we just take some time out here and re-strategize about where we're going? Right? The point being is they had to be committed. And, it's just, he would say to you, it's just that you're 1% more than your fears. You're just 1% more than your fears. Can you just take that one step beyond it? Because if you allow it to consume you, if you allow it to kind of dominate your mind, then you will do nothing. Right. And these were from guys right at the edge. And for me, in everyday life, work and continue to work with the guy, you know, as many people know, down in South Africa, who was caught tampering with a cricket ball, one of the best cricket players in the world by far. And afterwards, in dealing with the aftermath and the kind of public, you know, humiliation, you know, being on Fox News and CBS, being on Sky, being on every TV around the world, and being labelled and being shouted at your girlfriend at the time, being shouted at your parents, and all the rest of it. And you know, I was there in Cape Town when it happened, and then I took the flights back to Australia with them. But you know, when he was coming back, you know, what we had to recognize was that running out in that pit, you know, people were going to kind of, you know, treat him with total disrespect.
Right.
And it is frightening. You know, it is simply frightening. And I don't know whether you've ever had the experience of being, you know, on the other side of 1,000 cameras, right? Or, you know, that physical abuse online, etc. And, you know, so there's a lot of fear. And what we do, and what we did is, you know, we did a lot of visualization. We did a lot of meditation on what was likely to happen and how he could deal with it and how he could cope with it.
Right.
And it's exactly the same thing as when I'm working with politicians. They have exactly the same problem, you know, facing a crowd of people of which 20%, 30%, 40% are going to be favorable. Right. Maybe 50, 60, 70% are hugely hostile to you. Yep. And you have to walk that crowd. And it's not that they have a special gene. You know, if people think they have a special gene, they're wrong. It's not that they're not sitting there panicking over it. It's not that they're not in a dark room somewhere thinking, I cannot do this. I've been through all of those. You know, I recently was through an experience with, you know, a guy who was under SEC investigation and SFO investigation. And again, when you're at the edge and you're having these type of pressures, you know, for anybody to tell me, and they've come out and he's won. But the point being is there wasn't any kind of miracle cure. It was just a willingness to take the matter on. It was a willingness to understand the fear. It was a willingness to accept what was inevitable, which was, you know, what was likely, and then say, okay, so they're going to scream at me, they're going to shout at me, they're going to abuse me. How can I take energy from that? How can I take that and turn it into energy for me so that I can move forward?
I love that you say there's no magic cure, because, you know, in our microwave society, we want something quickly. Well, it's going to take away my fears. And, you know, even in this summit about getting past your fears or using them to propel you to purpose, there is no magic. It is the willingness, as you say, to do the work. And it is the work, small steps, day by day, consistently facing it. Now, you brought up one tool that I love, and because I know you do this a lot in the sports community, and it applies to any part of our life in any genre. Talk more about visualization, because that is an amazing tool which taps into the power of the mind in a way that if you've never done it, you don't understand what you have available to you. So share with us some stories about the power of visualization.
Well, you know, the unconscious mind doesn't know whether you're doing it or not doing it, right? And that's kind of the first thing. So, you know, and people have this concept of visualization, you know, as if it's a soft skill. It's a really hard skill. So I tend to work with individuals, you know, across what I call 4 or 5 mindsets, which is, you know, mental reflection, mental redirection, mental visualization, mental meditation, etc., etc. And the visualization aspect of it is there is not a top performer. And, you know, I work with the elite of cricket, the elite of football, the elite of rugby, the elite of golf. There is not a top performer in sports that does not use it. Or if they're not using it and they're listening to this, they should be, because they'll be better, right? Yeah. But in actual fact, we go through a process of absolutely visualizing every single thing that's likely to happen. So you take a player, and I will say, we'll start in the room, the hotel room. Where are you going to walk? Take me down the corridor. Take me down the stairs. What do you see? What do you smell? What do you feel? So that there is no surprise from the moment they leave the room to when they hit the ground. When they walk into the ground, what is the smell? What's the sense? What do you see? What do you hear? Tell me. Let's go through all of that process. In your pre-practice routine, take me through the pre-practice routine. We go through it. And I will tell you that, you know, that the elite performers that are working with me are doing it for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, every single time they go out to play. But they're doing it in training as well, because the critical point that's really important in this is that it's down to muscle memory. We do not do anything in play, right? We don't test anything in play that we haven't tested 1,000 times in practice. Right? Because in play, you have to be thinking and doing at the same time. And if you're not in that kind of magic moment, and for me, I don't look like a sports coach as such, right? So I'm not a tracksuit coach. I'm a mindset coach.
That's right.
And where I have the opportunity to make a difference is in the downtime.
Yes.
So when the ball is out of play, when you're walking between a tee shot and your second shot or third shot or fourth shot, hopefully not too many after that, right? Or when you're at the crease in cricket and the ball is just gone out of play, what's going on? Because what happens is minds wander, and I used the expression this morning, which is sometimes a mind that's not focused, it's like spilt water; it flows everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? So what we have to do is to say, how can we channel and how can we focus that?
Absolutely. It's interesting as you talk about visualization and the amount of time, and like you say, it's not a soft skill. I mean, this is serious work. But what's interesting in a everyday way, a lot of us who struggle with fear will often visualize bad things happening to us. Now, we're not hopefully spending hours and hours and hours doing that, although some people who are wrapped up in fear may do that without realizing it. But what's interesting is that the power of the mind, what you focus on, expands. So if I take the same idea of you focusing on going through all those motions, and I do the same thing in my fears, and I go to worst case scenario and I see it all play out, and this is what's going to happen, and this is all that's in my mind, what's going to happen to me then? I mean, I always say we allow our mind to be just a playground for anything. We need gates. We need to say, you're allowed in, you're not. And so really the power of visualization can work against us, can't it? If we don't respect that tool.
Yeah, but you see, the challenge that and this comes back to the unfocused mind. So the challenge that we have is that we spend 80% of the time worrying about the 20% that of our lives, and the reality that we actually have is in that 80% it never happens in the way that we expect it to.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about negativity and visualizing negativity, right, that the problem, and this goes back to what Daniel Kahneman's saying, is that if you do not consciously adopt a mindset, one is subconsciously adopted for you.
Yes.
And one of my favorite quotes is from Viktor Fractal's work on mindfulness, when he says that, the only thing the human mind has to fear, the only thing that can't be taken away from it, the only thing that cannot be taken away from it up until the moment you die, there's only one thing that cannot be taken away from you, and that's your attitude to life. You get to choose it. Right? So when we're talking about fear, we can say, I will give you rent-free space in my brain. I will allow you to contaminate my thoughts. Right. I will allow you to fill, the space, right? And all the brilliant things that I can do and all the magic that's within me and all the love that I can offer and all the spirit, I'm going to allow all of that to be crowded out because I'm going to feed the very thing that holds me back. And not alone am I going to feed it, I'm going to starve the things that are going to enable me to be great.
Yes.
Right? So we're feeding one and we're starving the other.
Yes.
And in actual fact, I say that positivity is a virus. It contaminates human beings. So let's pass the virus on.
Yes.
And we can absolutely change the nature of people's days by the attitude that we have and by the body language that we display. Yes. Because again, 60%, 68, 70% of our communication is body language. It's totally and utterly driven by, what we're expressing through the emotions that we're kind of saying with our body rather than with the words that we express.
Well, you know what? We need to hear that right now, what you just said, because one thing I've noticed more and more is what we're losing during this pandemic is respect for each other or treating each other the right way. When you walk into a public situation, I don't know if you feel it over there, but I can tell you all of my friends and family feel it over here in the US. There is a distrust of everyone in everyone's eyes. There is a lack of civility that used to be there. And I keep saying, I think we need to learn how to treat each other again. And what you're saying is basically all of that can either spread negativity like a virus or spread positivity. And I can tell you right now, I feel it in the air that we're missing that civility and that love. And instead, we are swimming in negativity, anger, and so many other things that it is really hard not to be affected by that. So what do you say to somebody? You know, we're all in a difficult situation right now. There is a lot of fear out there about so many things that we have no say-so, no control over. So how do we bring ourselves into that situation and say, I'm going to combat these fears, I'm going to be the best version of myself, and I'm going to continue to have hope for my future?
But, you know, and you know, the current situation is interesting. It really is, right? And, you know, I do, you know, a lot of behavioral analysis for politics. And, you know, the most consistent thing that I know about politics is bad news sells. Fear sells.
Yes.
Right? It sells, right? So if you're a politician, if I can scare the living daylights out of you and I can say I'm the savior, right, then I'm in a good place, right? You know, if I try to press positivity, you know, the other guy knocks me or the other person knocks me, whatever it is. But what we have to do is to take control of ourselves. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. And it's a really important point here, is we have to start loving ourselves more. Because in actual fact, by loving ourselves more, right, we start loving other people more. And people think this is a bit egotistical or self-centered. No. But self-love is so important. And it's really difficult to say that I can express, I can, you know, engender, you know, great love in other people if I hate myself.
That's right.
But the thing that stops us is that critical voice in our head, right? I'm not good enough. But who says you're not good enough? My own voice. Right. You know, I'm frightened. Who says you're frightened? My own voice. Who says, you know, that I'm terrified? Whatever. All of these, the voice in our head absolutely, totally and utterly manipulates us. And it's in taking that self-control and that self-responsibility. It's about taking that ownership. Then to an extent, we can start facing the world a little bit more open and we can start approaching some of these topics a little bit different. But we also have a responsibility to give. And I absolutely support that. And, you know, the big argument over here, which I'm sure it's in the US as well, which I've heard it, is, you know, about wearing face masks. And wearing face masks is, you know, to me, I respect you. Right. Because it's not going to save my life. You know, if I'm getting the virus, I'm getting the virus, right? But irrespective of face mask, it means I'm going to try and not give it to you. So the first thing that I'm saying is, by putting a face mask on, is I respect you and I respect the environment. Right? And I respect my kids and I respect my grandparents and I respect all of these individuals that I might contaminate by my own stupidity. So, you know, in absolute fact is fear. We shouldn't allow it to contain us, and we should understand that everything that we want is on the other side of the fear that we allow to hold us back.
Amen. One of the best things ever to say. And still, where you are in life and all that you've done, you still face fear. You still struggle with things. What can you say to the person who feels like it's too late for them and there's too much fear? They're not, you know, they're not in a position where they feel like they can change their life, you know, and I want to give people hope, because I always say, if you're breathing, there's a purpose. So what do you say to that person who feels like too much has gone on, too much has passed, it's too late?
Oh, there's no such thing as it's too late. I'm never going to retire, because everybody I know who retires dies. So I've decided if I never retire, I'm never going to die.
I agree. Me neither. I'm not retiring either.
But, you know, I think it's important to understand, you know, I can sit here and say, you know, I'm a professor, I'm a doctor. I've spoken in front of thousands, 10,000, 12,000 people. I do motivational talks. I'm on the TV or radio every week. I travel the world. I work with, you know, FTSE 100 CEOs around the world. And sometimes I say, am I good enough? Yeah. Am I an imposter? Right? Am I absolutely, you know, doing the right thing? You know, is somebody going to find me out? You know, am I going to say something that, you know, in an audience that I'm going to walk out in front of that audience and I get terrified? You know, and you know, I do huge motivational talks, and I walk out in front of, you know, audience after audience after audience in India, in China, in Australia, in the US, wherever. And every time before I walk out, I'm nervous as hell,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
And part of that is because you so much want to do a good job.
Right.
You so much care about kind of getting across, but you're also thinking maybe they won't like me. Maybe they won't understand my accent.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll think I'm stupid. Maybe, whatever else, somebody in the audience will take just a dislike. And, sometimes you can walk out into that audience and you'll see somebody's body language and you're thinking they don't like me. And they haven't even said anything to you.
Right. And
they haven't even expressed anything, but you're now suddenly terrified of that group of people over there. And you're thinking, I'm going to focus over here.
Right.
But we all have that. We all have that fear. I have fear for the future for my kids. I've got 3 kids in their 30s, and I've got an 11-year-old. Fear that you're going to die. Fear all of those things. But we have a 1 in 400 trillion chance of being here today. Right? So there's 399 blah 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 trillion people who didn't get the opportunity, who weren't given this life. Right? Who weren't given this moment in time. They weren't given the chance to kind of have and make a footprint, who could make a difference to so many people. Yeah. And we're going to sit there and shrivel up on a couch and say, I'm afraid. Well, I'm sorry. As a coach, that's just not good enough.
Amen.
You have a responsibility to get your act together, to step up, to step out, and to kind of make the contribution that only you can make. All right. And we need it. That's the whole point. We so badly need people to make a contribution, but what I fear is that so many people will allow fear to stop them.
Yes. I can't even say it better. I don't even want to opine on that, because that was beautiful, period, the end. Dr. Duffy, you are amazing. I knew this was going to be a good interview, but now I'm so jazzed.
Thank you very much.
So much. I want you to share with people how they can get more from you. How can they hear more of your intelligence, your brilliance, your experience? Share that with us.
So I'm on Twitter at the Beak Squawks. That's BEAK, Beak Squawks. And I love Twitter, right? So I kind of do morning Zen thoughts on the Beak Squawks. I have a webpage, www.mauriceduffy.com, and that's Maurice, as in the North American one or French one, mauriceduffy.com. Or you send me an email. I'll always have an opinion. The one thing I'll guarantee is I won't always agree with you.
Right.
I will have an opinion. I will respond. So send me an email on letstalk@mauriceduffy.com. Because I'm a student of the topic. I just cannot get enough information. I don't feel I have the answers. I thank you very kindly for kind of saying, the brilliance. I think, I don't know, was I all right? I go on, and my wife Karen will tell you, I go on the radio, the TV. I will never listen to myself.
Right.
I think why would anyone want to?
Right.
So I'll never listen. So she kind of listens to the radio, the TV, or whatever else it is, or I'll never listen to myself. So the point being is that fear is there to be conquered.
Yeah.
Right? It's something that holds us back. And for me, and the information or the advice that I would give is, you are brilliant. Yeah. You're a magical human being. You've been given a unique moment in time. Please use it.
Amen. That is beautiful. We need everybody. Thank you so much. I wish we could go on and on, but I promise you half an hour. And you've been so kind to give me that.
I'm going to the pub now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Enjoy. You do that. You enjoy. And thank you, Dr. Duffy. I hope we can do something in the future. Thank you for blessing this audience.
Not at all. Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.